The day my daughter-in-law threw away a box of my late wife's letters, she had no idea one was addressed to a federal attorney. Its disappearance didn't just break my heart, it triggered a federal investigation. And the penalty for destroying that kind of evidence is up to 20 years in prison. I'm James Alden, a 61-year-old architect. For months, my daughter-in-law, Chloe, had been decluttering my home after my wife Alina's passing. But when a federal agent showed up asking for a specific letter Alina had promised to send, the real question emerged. What did my wife know that was worth destroying? And what happens when the person who hid the truth is part of your own family? Alina wasn't just my wife of 38 years. She was a senior paralegal for the same Whiteshoe law firm for 22 years. She worked on high-stakes corporate compliance cases, and 3 months before she died, she changed. She became quiet, withdrawn. She'd sit at her desk in our home office for hours, long after she'd officially retired, sorting through old files. I thought it was grief, or maybe the early stages of the illness we didn't yet have a name for, ovarian cancer. It took her in 6 brutal months. Our son Mark and his wife Chloe moved in temporarily to help 2 weeks after the diagnosis. My house in Chestnut Hill, the one Alina and I designed together, became a hospice, then a memorial, then their domain. Chloe took over. First it was the cooking, which was a relief, then the laundry. Then, a month after the funeral, she started with the organizing. She called it helping me heal. She'd say, "James, all this clutter, it's holding you in the past. Let's make some space for you to breathe." It started with Alina's clothes, donated. Then her books from law school, boxed for the library sale. I'd come home from my architecture studio to find another corner of our life emptied, sanitized. Chloe had a mantra: if it doesn't spark joy, it's just dust. But here's the thing about a lifelong paralegal: their life is paper. Alina kept everything. Case notes from decades ago, correspondence, drafts of briefs, personal letters. She had 4 large filing cabinets in the office, and several bankers' boxes in the attic marked Archives Personal. Chloe set her sights on those. "This is a fire hazard, James," she'd say, tapping a banker box. "And it's just old work stuff. It's not her. She's in our hearts, not in these dusty papers." I put my foot down. "Those stay, all of them." There was a tension then, a flash in her eyes that wasn't the helpful daughter-in-law. It was calculation. Mark brushed it off. "She's just trying to help, Dad. You're hoarding. It's not healthy." The pressure was constant. Subtle comments about how big the house was for one man, how much the property taxes were, how a fresh start in a condo would be easier. They were living rent-free, but the narrative was that I was the burden, stuck in my ways, drowning in memorabilia. Then, a Tuesday in October, I came home early with a migraine. The house was quiet. I went upstairs to lie down and heard a faint, rhythmic tearing sound coming from the end of the hall. The attic pull-down ladder was open. I climbed up. The single bulb was on, and there was Chloe back to me, sitting cross-legged on the plywood floor. Around her was a sea of shredded paper. She had one of Alina's archives boxes open. She was methodically pulling out handfuls of letters, documents, and feeding them into a small, cheap shredder she'd plugged into the rafters. The rage was so pure, so white-hot, I couldn't even speak for a moment. "What," I finally said, my voice a low gravel, "are you doing?" She jumped, whirling around. Her face was flushed, not with guilt, but with effort. "James, you scared me. I'm just finally tackling this. Look at this mess. It's all junk. Old phone bills, seminar notes, it's trash." I walked over, my shoes crunching on paper snow. I snatched a torn fragment from the pile next to her. It was a piece of a letterhead. I could make out "Apartment of Jus" and part of an address. "This is not trash. This was my wife's life. You had no right." She stood up, dusting off her jeans, that defensive mask sliding into place. "I have every right. Mark and I are managing this house now. We're thinking of your well-being. You're going to trip on this stuff or a mouse nest will start a fire. I'm protecting you." "Get out," I said. "Get out of this attic now." She left huffing. I spent the next hour on my knees trying to gather the shredded fragments. It was impossible. The shredder was a strip-cut model turning pages into confetti. I salvaged a few larger pieces, a corner of a photograph of Alina with colleagues, a slice of a birthday card I'd written her, the Department of Justice fragment. I took the remaining 3 intact archive boxes and carried them, heavy as bodies, down to my locked home office. I changed the lock on the office door that night. The fight that caused was nuclear. Mark accused me of distrusting family. Chloe cried, saying I was treating her like a criminal. I held the line. The boxes stayed with me, but I made a catastrophic error. I assumed the shredded box was the only one she'd touched. I was wrong. She'd been at this for weeks. The first outside sign something was terribly wrong came 3 weeks later. A plain white envelope arrived, certified mail, return address from the U.S. Department of Justice, Washington, D.C. I opened it with a sense of dull foreboding. It was a formal, polite letter from a special agent, Raina Miller. It stated they were following up on correspondence from my late wife, Alina Alden, regarding a potential disclosure under the False Claims Act. The letter referenced a specific document, a detailed memo Alina had reportedly sent to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. The government had received an initial summary, the letter said, but not the supporting evidence she'd promised to forward. They were writing to me, as the executor of her estate, to inquire if such documents existed among her effects and to arrange for their secure transfer. My hands went cold. The False Claims Act, whistleblower territory, qui tam cases. Alina had never mentioned this, not a word. I read the letter twice, the legal jargon coalescing into a terrifying picture. My wife had been preparing to blow the whistle on someone or some company for defrauding the government, and she told the feds she had the proof. I went straight to my office to the 3 saved boxes. I spent the next 8 hours going through every page, every folder. No memo to a U.S. attorney, no draft whistleblower complaint, no file marked FCA or disclosure, nothing. But I found a clue, a personal calendar from her final year. 3 months before her diagnosis, she had a recurring weekly note, always on Wednesdays, CD 4 p.m. And then 2 weeks before she got sick, a single entry, packaged to G. Vogel, EDPA final. I didn't know who CD was, but G. Vogel. A 5-minute internet search told me Gerald Vogel was the recently appointed U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. The package had been sent. The government got something, but not the supporting evidence, the proof. I called Agent Miller. Her voice was professional, cautious. I explained I was Alina's husband, that I'd received her letter, and that I was searching for the documents. I did not mention Chloe, not yet. "Mr. Alden," she said, her tone shifting. "The initial summary your wife submitted was highly compelling. It alleged a multi-year systematic overbilling scheme by a major federal contractor. We are very keen to see the underlying documentation. Its absence complicates things." "What contractor?" I asked, my mouth dry. "I'm not at liberty to disclose that," she said, "but the potential liability is in the 9-figure range. The statute of limitations is a factor. We need those documents to proceed." 9 figures, over $100 million. My quiet, meticulous wife had been sitting on a bomb. I told Agent Miller I would keep looking. After I hung up, I sat in the silence of my office. The pieces connected with a sickening click. Alina's withdrawal, her secretive sorting, the package to the U.S. Attorney, and Chloe shredding a box of old papers from the attic with desperate urgency. I confronted them that night at dinner. "The Department of Justice is looking for a package of documents Alina sent," I said, watching their faces. "Evidence for a fraud case. It's missing." Mark looked confused. Chloe froze, a forkful of salad halfway to her mouth. "What? That's crazy. Mom wouldn't be involved in that." She was, I said, my eyes locked on Chloe. And someone made sure the evidence disappeared. The box you shredded, what was in it? I told you, junk. Her voice was too high, too sharp. It had a Department of Justice letterhead in it, Chloe. I saw the fragment. Mark jumped in. Dad, stop. You're being paranoid. You're grieving. The government has it wrong. The agent said the initial filing was compelling, but without the backup documents, the case collapses. The company walks, and the person who destroyed those documents, I let the sentence hang, citing the research I'd done that afternoon. That's federal evidence tampering, a prison sentence of up to 20 years. The color drained from Chloe's face completely. She didn't say another word. She just got up and left the room. Mark followed her, throwing me a look of pure betrayal. I heard them arguing in hushed, frantic tones in the guest wing. I couldn't make out words, but the rhythm was panic. That's when I knew for certain. The next morning, I went to see an attorney, not a family lawyer, a former federal prosecutor named David Shaw who now specialized in white-collar defense and whistleblower cases. I laid it all out: Eleanor's potential case, the missing documents, Chloe's destruction. Shaw steepled his fingers. James, you have a cascading legal disaster. First, the spoliation inference. A court can presume destroyed evidence would have been unfavorable to the destroyer. If your daughter-in-law shredded key documents, a judge could instruct a jury to assume those documents proved the fraud. He leaned forward. Second, and more severe, if it can be proven she knew the documents were sought by a federal investigation, that's obstruction. 18 U.S.C. Section 1519. That's the 20-year felony. And if the value of the fraud scheme is over $100 million, the sentencing guidelines become draconian. What do I do? I asked, the weight of it crushing me. You have a duty to the estate, he said, and potentially a duty to the government. You need to secure the remaining documents immediately. You need to document every interaction about this. And you need to understand that by pursuing this, you may be forcing the government to prosecute a member of your own family. I paid his retainer, $5,000, as I drove home. Shaw's final warning echoed. They will circle the wagons, James. You are now the threat. Be prepared. He was right. When I got home, the atmosphere was arctic. Mark was waiting in the living room. We need to talk, Dad. Chloe is devastated. Your accusations are destroying this family. She wants to apologize for overstepping with the shredding, but this whistleblower fantasy has to stop. It's not a fantasy, I said. The Department of Justice doesn't send letters about fantasies. Then maybe Mom was confused, Mark shouted. She was sick. Maybe she made it up. Did you ever think of that? You're choosing some bureaucratic witch hunt over your living family. That's when I saw it. The United Front. My son and his wife aligned against me and the truth of his mother. The pressure would only intensify. They paint me as a grieving, unstable old man. They challenge my competence. They try to get control. I went to my office, locked the door, and opened my safe. I took out the fragment of DOJ letterhead and the calendar with the G. Vogel note. This was my proof for now, but I needed more. I needed to understand what Eleanor knew. I started where I should have begun weeks ago. I called her oldest friend and former colleague, Susan, who still worked at the law firm. We met for coffee, away from the house. Eleanor was worried before she got sick, Susan confirmed, her voice low. She was auditing some old billing files from a corporate client for a compliance review, a defense contractor called Aegis Systems. She found discrepancies, massive ones. She brought it to the partners. And I pressed. Susan looked pained. They told her to drop it, that it was a billing software glitch from years ago, that the client was too important. She was furious. She said it wasn't a glitch, it was a pattern. She said she was going to do the right thing. The False Claims Act, I whispered. Susan nodded. She was gathering her own evidence off the network, copying files. She was scared, James. Not of the client, of the firm. She said if they found out she was going to the feds, they'd destroy her professionally, maybe legally. She must have mailed something to the U.S. attorney just to get it on the record before she got too sick. I drove home, my mind reeling. Aegis Systems, a major military supplier. Elinor had gone up against her own firm and a billion-dollar contractor, and the evidence that could bring it all down was now a pile of shreds in my attic, courtesy of my daughter-in-law. But why would Chloe do it? Was it just mindless decluttering, or was it something far worse? I got my answer the moment I walked through my front door. Chloe was standing there waiting. No tears now, just cold, clear-eyed resolve. In her hand was a single sheet of paper. "We need to discuss your living situation, James," she said, her voice formal. "Mark and I are concerned. Your recent paranoia, your hostile accusations, your locking rooms. We believe you may be experiencing cognitive decline. We think it's time to discuss power of attorney, for your own good." She placed the paper on the hall table. It was a drafted petition for guardianship. My own son's name was listed as the proposed guardian. They weren't just covering up a crime. They were moving to take control of my entire life, and they were starting by trying to have me declared incompetent. The battle for the truth had just become a war for my own freedom. I looked from the guardianship paper to Chloe's face. This wasn't just about hiding a crime anymore. This was a coup, and in that moment, I knew my own son was part of it. I didn't touch the paper. I just looked at her and said, "You have no idea what you've started." Then I walked past her, went into my office, and locked the door. My heart was hammering against my ribs. They were moving fast. A competency petition would freeze my assets, give Mark control of everything: the house, my studio, my finances, and all access to Elinor's remaining papers would vanish. I called David Shaw immediately. It was after hours, but he answered on the second ring. I told him about the guardianship draft. "Standard playbook," Shaw said, his voice grim. "Discredit the witness, seize control of the evidence. They're trying to legally neuter you before you can do anything. We need to move first." His instructions were precise. First, I was to secure all remaining physical documents from Elinor immediately, not in a home safe, off-site. Second, I needed to create an undeniable record of my own mental competence. Third, and most critical, I had to force the issue with the Department of Justice before my own family could silence me. "You're going to bring the mountain to Mohammed James," Shaw said. "You're going to call Agent Miller tomorrow and tell her everything. The shredding, the guardianship threat, all of it. You will offer full, voluntary cooperation. You will put yourself between the DOJ and the destroyed evidence. It's the only way to flip the script." "And if they decide to prosecute Chloe?" I asked, the words thick in my throat. "Then they prosecute Chloe," he said without hesitation. "Your duty is to the truth and to the estate. Her actions have consequences. You choosing to expose them isn't the cause, her destruction of evidence is." I spent the night scanning every single page from the 3 saved archive boxes onto an encrypted drive. At 5 in the morning, I loaded the physical boxes into my car and drove them to a 24-hour storage facility across town, renting a unit under my business name. The key went into a safety deposit box my son didn't know about. At 9 a.m., I walked into the office of a neurologist recommended by Shaw, a doctor who did independent competency evaluations for the courts. For 3 hours, I was poked, prodded, and tested. Memory recall, problem-solving, financial judgment. I aced it. The doctor wrote a detailed report concluding I was of superior cognitive function for my age and showed no signs of impairment. I paid in cash. I had my shield. Then from the parking lot, I called Agent Raina Miller. "Agent Miller, it's James Alden. We have a problem. The supporting documents you're looking for were destroyed, intentionally, by a member of my family, and now that family is attempting to have me declared incompetent to prevent me from cooperating with you." There was a long silence on the line. I could hear the click of a keyboard. Mr. Alden, she said, her tone now razor-focused. Where are you right now? In my car in Philadelphia. Do not go home. Do you have any of the documents in your possession? Digital copies and the originals are in secure, off-site storage. Good, drive to the Federal Building at 6th and Market. I'll meet you at the South Security entrance in 45 minutes. Bring everything you have. The meeting room was small, windowless. Agent Miller was in her 40s with a sharp gaze that missed nothing. With her was an assistant U.S. attorney named Carl Dern. I laid it all out. Elinor's work at the firm, Aegis Systems, the shredding, Chloe's actions, the guardianship play. I handed over the encrypted drive and the doctor's report. Dern, a man with a weary, intelligent face, steepled his hands. Mr. Alden, what you're describing is a conspiracy to obstruct a federal investigation. The destruction of evidence is a completed crime. The attempt to incapacitate you is witness tampering. This has escalated far beyond a missing document. What happens now? I asked. We open a formal obstruction case, Miller said. We will want to interview your son and daughter-in-law separately. We will subpoena their financial records, phone records. We will also need to contact Elinor's former law firm. This puts you in a difficult position. I understand, I said, though I didn't, not fully. Not yet. Dern leaned forward. The firm, Barton and Klein, has a problem. If they knowingly suppressed evidence of fraud by their client, they are complicit. They have massive liability. Your wife was their employee. Their first move will be to distance themselves from her, to paint her as a rogue, unstable element. And your family's story, that you are cognitively declining, fits their narrative perfectly. You will be attacked from both sides. I left the Federal Building 2 hours later, feeling both lighter and more burdened. The die was cast. The machinery of the state was now turning, and my family was in its gears. When I got home, Mark was waiting alone. Chloe was nowhere to be seen. Where have you been? He demanded. We've been worried sick. I had a doctor's appointment, I said evenly, holding up the thick envelope from the neurologist. A full cognitive evaluation. Would you like to read the report? It finds me perfectly competent, more than competent. His face fell. The wind left his sails. Dad, this has gone too far. We just were scared for you. No, Mark, I said, my voice breaking for the first time. You're scared for yourselves. I met with the Department of Justice today. I told them everything about Mom's case, about the shredding. They are opening an obstruction investigation against Chloe, possibly against you. The color drained from his face. You went to the feds against your own family. How could you? How could she? I fired back, the pain sharp and raw. How could she destroy your mother's work? Your mother was trying to expose a fraud that stole from taxpayers, from soldiers' budgets, and Chloe turned it into confetti, and you're helping her cover it up. You don't understand, he shouted, tears of frustration in his eyes. It's not that simple. Then make it simple for me, I roared. He deflated, sinking onto the bottom step of the staircase. He put his head in his hands. Chloe, before we met, she worked for Aegis Systems, in their contracts department, for 2 years. The air left the room. The final piece of the puzzle slammed into place with such force I nearly stumbled. She recognized the case, Mark mumbled into his hands. When Mom got sick and started talking vaguely about doing the right thing and Aegis, Chloe got nervous. She still has friends there. She called one. They told her if an old fraud case from that period got reopened, it could implicate people still at the company, people she worked with. They said it could even come back to her if anyone thought she knew something. He looked up, pleading. She wasn't trying to hurt Mom, she was scared. She thought if those papers just disappeared, the whole thing would go away. She was protecting her career, our future. And then when that DOJ letter came, she panicked. We both did. The guardianship, it was stupid. It was a desperate idea to make it all stop. I stared at my son, seeing a stranger. The motive wasn't greed. It was fear, cowardice. Chloe had shredded evidence to protect her former colleagues and her own professional past, and my son had chosen his wife's fear over his mother's legacy. "You have 48 hours," I said, my voice cold and flat, "to retain an attorney, a criminal defense attorney, Mark, not a family lawyer. Then you both need to leave my house. You are not welcome here." The next 72 hours were a blur of grim logistics. Shaw connected me with a forensic IT specialist. We cloned the hard drives from the home computer Chloe used and from Mark's laptop. We found the search history, false claims act penalties, spoliation of evidence, how long to keep documents, and damningly, a visit to the website of a private shredding service the week before the DOJ letter arrived. She'd been planning this. We also found emails between Chloe and an old friend at Aegis with vague but telling language. "Alina Alden is asking questions about the old Helmsworth project. This could be bad." The reply, "Make it go away. Nothing good comes from digging." The DOJ moved quickly. Subpoenas were issued to Barton and Klein for all files related to Aegis Systems, to Aegis itself for the Helmsworth project records, and to my home internet provider for our IP logs. The pressure immediately created fissures. Barton and Klein, in a panic, threw Alina under the bus. They issued a statement to the DOJ calling her a disgruntled employee whose unsubstantiated theories were investigated internally and dismissed. They claimed they had no knowledge of any whistleblower submission. They were lying, and the DOJ knew it. Then the hammer blow. A federal grand jury was convened. My testimony was scheduled. Shaw prepared me relentlessly. "They will ask you about Alina's state of mind. They will ask you to describe the shredded documents. They will ask you about every conversation with Mark and Chloe. Your story must be a straight line, fact after fact." The night before my testimony, Mark showed up at my office door. He looked hollowed out. "They offered her a deal," he said quietly. "The prosecutors. If she pleads guilty to one count of evidence tampering and testifies against her contact at Aegis and the partners at Barton and Klein who knew about the fraud, they'll recommend no more than 18 months, maybe just probation." I said nothing. "She's going to take it," he said, a sob catching in his throat. "My wife is going to be a felon because of you." "No," I said, finally looking at him. "Because of asterisk or asterisk, and because of you. Every step of the way you chose the wrong side. You chose to hide the truth instead of honoring your mother. You don't get to blame me for the consequences of that choice." He left. The next morning I walked into the grand jury room. I swore to tell the truth, and for 2 hours I did. I told them about my wife of 38 years. I told them about the quiet heroism of her final months. I described the shredder's sound. I recited the fragment of the DOJ letterhead. I confirmed the email chains from our own computer. When I walked out, Agent Miller was waiting. "That was powerful, Mr. Alden. Thank you." Then she added, "We've hit a wall with the underlying fraud case, however. Without Alina's documentation, proving the overbilling scheme beyond the summary she sent is nearly impossible. Aegis's lawyers are claiming the Helmsworth project was a billing anomaly corrected years ago. Without the proof, it's a dead end." So that was it. Chloe would get a slap on the wrist for obstruction, but the massive fraud, the thing Alina gave her final days to expose, would be buried. It felt like a grotesque failure. But Shaw saw it differently when I met him after. "The fraud case is secondary now," he said. "The obstruction case is the knife at the throat of the conspiracy. Chloe's deal forces her to talk. She will give up the person at Aegis who told her to make it go away. That person will flip on their superiors to avoid charges. The DOJ is climbing the ladder. They may not get Aegis for the original fraud, but they will get them for the cover-up. And they will absolutely crucify the law firm for obstruction and lying to federal investigators." He paused. "There's one more thing, the guardianship petition. With Chloe's guilty plea, that is dead, but it establishes intent. The U.S. attorney is considering adding witness tampering to the charges. That could add years to her sentence." It was a Pyrrhic victory paved with the rubble of my family. A week later, the call I dreaded and expected came. It was from Barton and Klein, not a lawyer. One of the named partners, Richard Klein himself. His voice was smooth, conciliatory, and utterly threatening. "James, we need to talk. This situation has been tragic for everyone. We believe we can find a resolution that benefits all parties before this spirals further and destroys what's left of your family's reputation and your financial security." He was offering a settlement, a large, quiet payment to me in exchange for my silence, a non-disclosure agreement so comprehensive it would erase Alina's story from history, and a hinted promise to make the family issues, Chloe's legal troubles, go away. It was a bribe, a multi-million-dollar bribe to bury the truth my wife died to tell, and they were using my shattered family as leverage. I told him I'd consider his offer. I hung up and looked at the framed photo on my desk of Alina, smiling, alive. I knew what she would want me to do, but the cost of doing it was now clearer than ever. It wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about survival. And as I sat there, I realized the most dangerous players had just entered the game. Richard Klein's settlement offer wasn't just a bribe. It was a blueprint. It showed me exactly how the machine worked and who was willing to grease the gears. But I made one fatal error in my response. I hesitated. For 24 hours, I agonized. The number they'd floated was $3 million, tax-free, enough to secure my retirement 10 times over to never worry again. They'd also promised to resolve Chloe's legal situation, which I now understood meant using their influence to get her plea deal sweetened, maybe even reduced to a misdemeanor. In return, I would sign a statement saying I'd misunderstood Alina's intentions, that her documents were personal and irrelevant, and that I would cease all cooperation with the DOJ. They would make my family whole again. The temptation was a physical ache, to end the war, to have my son look at me without hatred, to sleep through the night. But then I'd look at Alina's picture. I remembered the fierce light in her eyes when she talked about justice, about scale. "It's not a mistake, James," she'd said once, late at night. "It's a system, and systems are made of people who choose to look away." I called David Shaw. "They've offered a settlement." "Of course they have," he said, sounding unsurprised. "It's cheaper than their potential liability and their reputational ruin. What's the number?" I told him. He whistled softly. "That's a go away and never speak again number. You should know, if you take it, the non-disclosure agreement will be ironclad. You will be legally muzzled for life, and the DOJ investigation into the underlying fraud will likely collapse without your testimony. That's the point. And if I don't take it, then Barton and Klein and Aegis Systems become your permanent enemies. They will attack your credibility, your finances, your sanity. They have billions of dollars and centuries of combined legal experience. They will make the next phase of your life a living hell. But," he paused, "you will have kept faith with your wife." I didn't give him my answer. I needed to see the full cost first. I asked Mark to meet me at a neutral place, a park bench overlooking the river. He arrived looking gaunt, older. "They made me an offer too," he said before I could speak. His voice was flat. "From Dad's old firm, through Chloe's lawyer." My blood ran cold. "What offer?" "If you take their settlement and sign their papers, they will pay off our legal debts. They'll give me a consulting job with a 6-figure salary for 5 years, no actual work required. And they'll make sure Chloe gets probation, no jail time." He looked at me, his eyes hollow. "They said it's the only way to save her, to save us." They had outflanked me. They went straight to my son's desperation and put a price on his conscience, and they made me the obstacle to his salvation. "And if I refuse?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Mark's face crumpled. "Then we lose everything. Chloe goes to prison. I'll be bankrupt from legal fees, and it will be your fault. You'll have chosen a dead woman's crusade over your living son's future." He stood up. The choice is yours, Dad, but know what you're choosing. He walked away. I sat on that bench for an hour, watching the river flow, carrying away pieces of my life. That night I made my decision. I called Richard Klein. The answer is no, I said. No settlement, no silence. The warmth vanished from his voice. That is unwise, James, truly. I urge you to reconsider. The path you're choosing has consequences you cannot imagine. I think I can, I said and hung up. The consequences began within 72 hours. First, a process server arrived at my studio with a lawsuit. Barton and Klein, on behalf of Aegis Systems, was suing me for defamation and tortious interference with business relations. They claimed my false and malicious allegations to the DOJ had caused Aegis to lose a major Department of Defense contract, seeking $20 million in damages. It was a strategic lawsuit against public participation, a SLAPP suit, designed not to win, but to bury me in legal costs and discovery until I broke. David Shaw grimaced when he saw it. This will cost you $200,000 to defend minimum, and they know it. The second consequence was more subtle. My largest architecture client, a developer I'd worked with for 15 years, called to pause our current project. He was vague, apologetic. Just until this noise clears up, James. A week later, 2 more longtime clients followed suit. The word was out in the Philadelphia business community. James Alden was radioactive. The third consequence was the media. An article appeared in the business section of the local paper. Whistleblower widows' claims spark legal battle, family feud, or corporate cover-up. It was a masterpiece of false balance. It quoted legal experts, suggesting Alina's mental state at the end of her life was questionable. It mentioned my ongoing familial disputes and the aggressive lawsuit from Aegis. It painted me as a troubled old man caught in a confusing fight. My reputation, built over 40 years, was being dismantled in 1,000 words. But the worst was yet to come. I received a formal notice from my homeowner's insurance company. They were canceling my policy, citing material increase in hazard due to the high-profile litigation and associated security risks. I had 30 days to find new coverage. For a $3 million home in Chestnut Hill, that was impossible without an active policy. No insurance meant I'd be in default on my mortgage. They were trying to take my house, not through guardianship, but through financial strangulation. I was in Shaw's office, reeling from the insurance blow when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Mr. Alden, a woman's voice, young, nervous. My name is Anya Petrov. I was a junior analyst at Aegis Systems on the Helmsworth project. I need to talk to you about your wife. We met in a crowded food court, the noise providing cover. Anya was in her late 20s, clutching a coffee like a lifeline. I worked under the project lead, Ian Croft. Your wife's summary to the DOJ, it was right. It was all right. The overbilling wasn't a mistake. It was a directive. We had a second set of books. Project Minerva. My heart began to hammer. Why are you telling me this now? Because they're shutting it down, she whispered, her eyes darting. Now that the DOJ is sniffing around, Croft is purging everything. He's having the original server drives physically destroyed this weekend. The digital copies are already gone. If they succeed, there will be no evidence left. It will all be anomalies and accounting errors. Your wife's documents were the last external copy. Why come to me? Go to the DOJ. I tried, she said, tears in her eyes. 2 days ago, I called the tip line. This morning, I was called into HR and fired for performance issues. My laptop was confiscated. They made it clear they know I talked. I'm scared, Mr. Alden. She handed me a small, encrypted USB drive under the table. This is what I could get out. It's not everything, but it's proof. Invoices, internal emails, the Minerva ledger from 6 months ago. It's enough to prove the scheme existed, but if the originals are destroyed. She left quickly. I went straight to Agent Miller. I handed her the drive and told her about the server destruction plan. She listened, her face hardening. We've been stonewalled by Aegis on the server access. They claim legacy system issues. If they're planning physical destruction, that's obstruction on an industrial scale. She picked up her phone. We need a warrant, tonight. But the system moves slowly, even in an emergency. It took hours to get a judge to sign off. By the time a joint FBI-DOJ raid team descended on the Aegis Data Center in a suburban office park at 3 a.m., they were too late. The scene Agent Miller described to me the next morning was one of brazen theatrical destruction. The server racks for the Helmsworth project were there, but the drives were gone. In the center of the room, in a heavy-duty industrial shredder typically used for destroying hard drives, was a pile of twisted metal and plastic confetti. Still warm, the security logs for the night had been deleted. The single overnight technician claimed he'd seen nothing. The physical evidence was now dust. Anya's drive was a snapshot, but without the source material to authenticate it, Aegis's lawyers would call it a fabrication. The perfect crime. I felt a despair so profound it was like falling. We had lost. Eleanor had lost. The truth was literally in a dumpster. But then David Shaw called. His voice crackled with an energy I hadn't heard in weeks. James, I just got off the phone with the DOJ's Forensic Accounting Unit. They've been analyzing the data from Anya's drive. They found something. What? A trail your wife was too good to leave, but Aegis was too arrogant to hide. The Minerva ledger on the drive shows payments, not just fake invoices to the government. Internal payments, kickbacks. A small, regular payment from a subsidiary of Aegis to a numbered Delaware LLC. And that LLC, he said, pausing for effect, is owned by a trust whose beneficiary is Richard Klein's nephew. The revelation was seismic. It wasn't just a client covering up fraud. It was the law firm getting a piece of the action. Barton and Klein wasn't just obstructing justice to protect a client. They were obstructing justice to cover up their own corruption. This changes everything, Shaw said. The DOJ now has a direct financial link between the fraud and the law firm. This moves the case from obstruction to racketeering. They can go after the firm under RICO statutes. This is existential for them. Within hours, the atmosphere shifted. The defamation lawsuit against me was suddenly put on hold for procedural review. The news article was quietly updated with an editor's note. This story has been revised to reflect new developments in the case. And then the call from Mark. He was crying. Dad, they dropped the deal, the job, the probation for Chloe, it's gone. Klein's office said the situation has evolved. What's happening? I told him about the kickback, about the RICO investigation now targeting his father's old firm. He was silent for a long time. So they used us. They used Chloe's fear and my desperation to get to you, and when it got too hot, they threw us away. Yes, I said, the word heavy with a sorrow that wasn't just mine. I'm sorry, Dad, he whispered, for everything. It was a start, but it didn't change the facts on the ground. The evidence was still gone. The whistleblower case was crippled, and I was facing financial ruin. That's when I remembered something. Something Eleanor had said in her final weeks when the pain medication made her foggy but sometimes shockingly clear. We'd been talking about cloud storage, about backing up photos. She smiled a secret smile and said, "The cloud is just someone else's computer, James. I prefer my own little vault." At the time, I thought she meant her external hard drive, which Chloe had also shredded. But what if she did? I went back to the storage unit, to the last archive box I hadn't fully processed, the one marked MISC, personal. Buried under old tax returns and insurance policies, I found a small, unremarkable black metal case, the size of a paperback book. It was locked. There was no key. It took a locksmith 20 minutes to open it. Inside, nestled in foam, was a single device. A high-capacity, military-grade encrypted flash drive, and a handwritten note in Eleanor's precise script. James, if you're reading this, the worst has happened. This contains the Helmsworth archive, the Minerva ledger, and every supporting document. The copy I sent to Vogel was redacted to protect sources. This is the complete set. The password is our song, the one from the lake, plus the year we met. I love you. Finish it. My hands trembled as I held the drive, our song, Moon River, the year we met, 1982. I didn't go home. I drove straight to the federal building, the drive clutched in my hand. I called Agent Miller from the parking garage. I have it, I said, my voice cracking. Eliner's vault, the complete evidence. 30 minutes later, in a secure room, we plugged it in. I entered the password. The drive unlocked, revealing a meticulously organized digital file structure. Thousands of documents. Scanned invoices, internal memos, encrypted email chains, the full, unredacted Minerva ledger with every transaction, every kickback, for 7 years. Agent Miller scrolled, her eyes widening. This is it, she breathed. This is the entire scheme, the map. This isn't just evidence, this is a confession. She looked at me, respect and pity in her gaze. This guarantees convictions, James, at Aegis, at the law firm. This is what they were trying to destroy. I felt no triumph, only a deep, weary relief. Eliner had won. From beyond the grave, she had outmaneuvered them all. What happens now? I asked. Now, she said, the real reckoning begins, and for you the hard part is over. You can go home. But I couldn't. Not yet. Because delivering the truth had come at a cost I was only beginning to understand. My house was uninsurable. My business was bleeding clients. My son's wife was headed for a felony conviction, and the powerful enemies I'd made were not going to disappear just because they were indicted. I had the truth, but I had lost almost everything else. And as I walked out of the federal building into the cold night, I faced a final, brutal question. What do you build from the ruins of a life when the only thing left standing is the truth? The truth was safe, but my life was in shambles. I stood on the steps of the federal building that night, holding nothing but my car keys, and realized victory and ruin can wear the same face. I couldn't go back to the empty, uninsurable house. I booked a hotel room for a week. The silence there was different, temporary, anonymous. It gave me space to think. The first thing I did was call David Shaw. We use the leverage, he said, his voice crisp with strategy. The DOJ has the evidence. They are about to bring historic indictments. You are now a protected witness and the hero who delivered the case. We go back to Barton and Klein, not for a settlement but for a restoration. His plan was audacious. We would not sue them. Instead, we would present a demand. They would quietly reinstate my homeowner's insurance through their own vast corporate policy, citing an administrative error. They would contact my lost clients and reassure them, implying the litigation was a misunderstanding now resolved. And they would pay my legal fees in full, plus a sum for emotional distress. Not $3 million, but enough to secure my future. In return, I would not pursue a separate civil suit against them for the SLAPP suit or the defamation. It was a ceasefire, not a peace treaty, but it was survival. Shaw made the call. This time they listened. The firm was in full damage control mode, terrified of the looming RICO indictments. They agreed to every term within 48 hours. My insurance was magically reinstated. 3 clients called, sheepish, asking to resume work. A wire transfer for $1.2 million hit an escrow account. It felt dirty, it felt necessary. Chloe's legal fate was out of my hands. With the full evidence now available, her cooperation was less critical, but her guilty plea to evidence tampering stood. At her sentencing, the prosecutor, now armed with Eliner's vault, did not recommend probation. He argued that the deliberate destruction of evidence in a matter of such scale demanded a deterrent sentence. The judge agreed. Chloe was sentenced to 28 months in a federal prison camp. Mark was in the courtroom. He didn't look at me. After the sentencing, I waited for him outside. He walked out, pale and stooped. "I'm moving to Colorado," he said flatly. "I got a job offer. I'll be near the facility where she's serving. I need to start over." "I understand," I said, and I did. The cost of his loyalty and his betrayal was now being paid in years. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," he said, but the heat was gone from the words. They were just a statement of fact. "I know," I replied, "but I hope one day you'll understand why I couldn't forgive what she did." He nodded once, a faint, broken motion, and walked away. That was the last time I saw my son. The indictments were handed down 2 months later, splashed across the national news. Operation Minerva ensnared 7 executives from Aegis Systems, including the CEO and 4 senior partners from Barton and Klein, including Richard Klein himself. The charges were numerous: major fraud against the United States, wire fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. The potential recovery for the government was estimated at over $400 million. At the press conference, the U.S. Attorney Gerald Vogel held up a copy of the unredacted ledger. This case was built on the extraordinary courage of a whistleblower, Alina Alden, who, despite immense pressure, documented this scheme with forensic precision. And it was secured by the perseverance of her family in protecting her legacy. He didn't say my name. I was a family, a protected source. I watched it on the hotel room television alone. I cried for the first time since Alina's funeral. With the criminal cases moving forward, the Civil False Claims Act case proceeded. As the whistleblower's spouse and executor, I was the named plaintiff. The government intervened, and the settlement with Aegis Systems was finalized 9 months later. The total, $430 million. Under the False Claims Act, the whistleblower is entitled to a share of the recovery, between 15 and 30%. The DOJ, recognizing Alina's paramount role and the extreme efforts to suppress her evidence, awarded the maximum, 30%. $129 million. It was deposited into a trust, managed by an institutional trustee I selected. The money felt abstract, monstrous. It wasn't wealth, it was blood money, transfused from the veins of a corrupt system into mine, a final, grotesque gift from my wife. I paid off my mortgage. I donated a massive portion to nonprofits that protect whistleblowers and fight government fraud. I set up a scholarship in Alina's name at her alma mater for students studying ethics and law. The rest sits, managed, for a future I haven't planned for. I sold the house in Chestnut Hill. Every room echoed with ghosts. Alina's laughter marks childhood, Chloe's shredder my own blind trust. I bought a smaller, modern home on a wooded lot outside the city. It has no attic. I hired an architect, a young woman just starting her firm. It felt good to be the client, to build something new. One afternoon, 6 months after moving in, a letter arrived, hand-addressed. The return label said R. Miller, Washington, D.C. It was a personal note from Agent Raina Miller. "James, I've left the DOJ for private practice. I wanted to write to you directly before I go. Working on Alina's case was the most meaningful work of my career. She was a patriot in the truest sense. And you were the steady hand that guided her truth through the storm. The system does not work without people like you both. I know the personal cost was devastating. I see it in the reports. But know this, because of you two, procurement protocols for 3 major defense departments have been rewritten. Dozens of corrupt individuals are facing justice. And the next person who thinks about cooking the books will think twice. That is your legacy and hers. With respect, Raina." I framed the letter. It sits on my desk beside the picture of Alina. The final surprise came on a Tuesday morning. A sleek car pulled into my driveway. A woman got out. It was Anya Petrov, the young analyst from Aegis who had given me the drive. She looked healthier, less haunted. We sat on my porch. "I testified," she said. "Against Croft and the others, it's over. I got immunity." She took a deep breath. "I came to thank you and to tell you something I couldn't before. The night I met you, I was lying." My heart stuttered. About what? The drive I gave you. It wasn't just data I got out. Alina gave it to me. The world tilted. What? She reached out to me months before she died. She knew I was uncomfortable with the Minerva project. She said she was building a case and she needed a contemporary source inside to confirm the scheme was ongoing. I was terrified, but she was so calm, so sure. She made me feel brave. We met twice. She gave me that drive and told me to keep it safe. She said if anything happened to her, or if her official disclosure was blocked, I should find you and give it to you. She said you were the only person she trusted to finish it. Tears streamed down Anya's face. When she died, I panicked. I buried the drive. Then when the DOJ letter came and Chloe started shredding, I knew the anything she'd warned about was happening. So I came to you. I'm sorry I lied. I was afraid you wouldn't trust me if you knew how deep it went. I was speechless. Alina hadn't just left a backup. She had built a network. She had recruited a second whistleblower inside the company as her failsafe. My meticulous, brilliant wife had engineered a dead man's switch that spanned beyond her own death. I reached out and took Anya's hand. Thank you, I said, my voice thick, for being brave, for finishing it with me. She smiled through her tears. She said you'd know what to do. She said you were the most principled man she'd ever met. After Anya left, I walked into my new study. I looked at Alina's picture, then at Raina Miller's letter, then out at the trees. The war was over. The truth had cost me my son, my peace, my past. It had given me a fortune I never wanted and a solitude I never asked for. But it had also given me back my wife. Not the sick woman fatting away, but the fierce, strategic, courageous hero she truly was. I had been her instrument, and in being so, I had found a strength I didn't know I possessed. Justice isn't a destination. It's a path you choose step by step, even when every step hurts. Alina chose it, and in the end, so did I. The house is quiet. The future is unclear. But for the first time in a long time, the quiet feels like peace, not emptiness. And the future, whatever it holds, is mine to face on terms I can finally respect. So what is the price of a truth? In my case, it was measured in the silence of a son, the bars of a prison, and the quiet of a new home filled with ghosts of the old. But the counter question, the one Alina's life asks, is more important. What is the cost of a lie left unchallenged? Her answer was $430 million. It was the careers of powerful men. It was a rewritten protocol that might save some soldier somewhere from defective equipment. It was a signal, faint but clear, that the gears of the machine are not immune to the grit of one person's conscience. We like to believe justice is a system, courts, laws, officers, but systems are passive. They wait for input. Real justice is an act. It's a choice made by someone who decides that the comfortable lie is more dangerous than the disruptive truth. Alina made that choice. Anya Petrov in her terror made it later. I in my grief and rage made it last. Our story isn't about a heroic victory. It's a map of the collateral damage. It shows how the shockwave of truth travels through the bedrock of a family, a career, a community, cracking everything in unexpected ways. The law calls it spoliation inference. The idea that destroyed evidence is assumed to be damning. But there's a human corollary. The desperate act to hide a truth often reveals a deeper, uglier one. Chloe wasn't evil, she was afraid. The firm wasn't monolithic. It was a collection of people choosing their careers over their oaths. My son chose loyalty to his present over legacy from his past. These are human failures, the kind we're all capable of. The battle wasn't between good and evil, but between courage and compromise, played out across a kitchen, an attic, and a federal courtroom. Alina's legacy isn't just the money recovered or the people convicted. It's a blueprint. She showed that you can build a vault for the truth that outlasts you. You can network it, protect it with passwords of love, and seed it with allies. You can make truth so resilient that even fire, shredders, and family betrayal cannot fully erase it. I am alone now, but I am not lonely. I am in the company of her principal. The solitude is the space where that principal finally has room to breathe. Some days, the price feels too high. Most days, I look at her picture and know she would have paid it herself without hesitation. So I leave you with this. Every system, a family, a company, a country, is built on a series of silent agreements about what truths are too expensive to tell. The integrity of that system isn't tested when things are easy. It's tested when someone reaches for the shredder or the settlement or the guardianship papers. It's tested in the attic. What would you protect? What would you destroy? And what, in the end, would you truly be left with? If this story of a letter, a legacy, and the light that refuses to be extinguished resonated with you, please share it. Let others know that some truths are worth the ruin. And for more documentaries about the hidden battles that shape our world, subscribe to this channel. Thank you for listening.